Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Welcome to a special episode of the Practice Podcast. This episode is a recording of a panel discussion from Bast Amron's 5th Annual Business Advantage Forum, which took place on January 12th, 2023. The forum is a learning event we host and underwrite each year with all the proceeds donated to a charitable organization. This year, our theme was rejuvenation, and this panel is called Talent Wars, Recruiting and Retention Strategies for a Competitive Market. If you enjoy this episode, we will be releasing more recordings from the forum on this podcast. And please join us for our next forum in 2024. And you can find information and recordings from prior years on our website at bastamron.com.
I'm going to introduce Jaime Leggett, who is our moderator. Jaime is an attorney with our firm. He is going to moderate a talent-laden panel on Talent Wars for recruiting and retention strategies.
All right, if I could ask the panelists to come up. All right, so hi there, everyone. We have an incredible panel for you today. We'll be touching on some of the topics that the mayor just raised about talent, recruiting people, valuing people, maintaining a good company culture. So this panel is Talent Wars, fighting out here in these trenches, recruiting and retention strategies for a competitive market. And so this is prompted because businesses now of all types and sizes are being besieged by staffing issues. They are struggling to find new employees, and they're struggling to keep the ones that they already have. And so today, our panel of experts that we have here, we're going to talk about what are the strategies that work in today's environment. How do you maintain a good office culture that will keep employees? And then how do you build and maintain diverse and inclusive work environments? So I'm going to intro the panelists in order from my left to my left, well, further left. Yeah. I don't know stage left, stage right, but so the first guy here is Seth Cassel. He's the co-founder and co-president of EveryMundo. He has a t-shirt. But his company is the global leader in fare marketing technology for airlines. If you booked a plane ticket, you've probably seen his company's technology at one point or another. So they work with over 60 airlines and other companies across 6 continents and 35 languages. His company built it from the ground up, bootstrapped it from himself and a partner, up to 170 employees worldwide, with about half of them in Miami. And so he holds a BA in mathematics and MBA, both from Harvard, or that school up in Boston. He has built a startup consultancy as well, and a music management company, and previously worked at Sony Music and at Citigroup. And finally, he is a board member of Lotus House, which is the charity we're supporting today. Next up, we have Torres, who is the VP and Senior Managing Counsel for Cyber and Intelligence Solutions Global at Mastercard, which is an unknown company that none of us have any idea what it is. So he needs no introduction. He is a lawyer and an entrepreneur who has worked with and advised some of the top Fortune 500 and European enterprises as well for over 20 years, or for almost 20 years. His experience ranges, and so this I'm going to have to read off because it's very broad. Infrastructure development, public-private partnerships, project finance, private equity, renewable energy, insurance, compliance, risk management, technology, cyber, crypto, media, social networking. There's probably other things, but we only have so much time. And so he has a bachelor's in business administration from the University of Puerto Rico and a law degree from the University of Puerto Rico School of Law. He's also an investor and an entrepreneur in the fields of wellness, wine, and hospitality. And then last but not least, we have Ebony Smith. She's the founder of Ebenum Equation. I hope I pronounced that right? Perfect. Which partners with clients to develop leadership resilience and improve team performance, specializing in volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous work environments. So she signs up for the tough stuff, among many, many other things. Ebony coaches corporate teams and corporate leaders trying to go from excellence to preeminence. She's also the co-founder of Ebenum Leadership Academy, which trains leaders to become coaches, and serves as a faculty fellow at the Florida International University Center for Leadership. She holds a BS in chemistry from Jefferson University and a master's in environmental protection and safety management from St. Joseph's University. And previously, Ebony worked in the Fortune 100 for 20 years for Ryder, Sunoco Logistics, BP, Integrated Supply and Trading, and World Food Services, including 13 years on the oil trading floor. So, as you can tell, we have a very esteemed panel of experts. And so just to start it off, I know like we were just hearing about headwinds going into 2023. It's going to be a wild ride. We don't have a crystal ball, but we have our very own mayor saying, well, maybe we'll have some economic troubles. But does that mean that this topic of recruitment and maintaining good culture, maintaining employees, that's not going to continue to be important through 2023 going forward? And I'll pass that to you, Ebony.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it continues to be important. And it's important for us to remember headwinds also come with tailwinds, right? So with the pandemic, there were winners and losers, and so much so that I had friends, we had a standing Friday night happy hour over Zoom, and we would talk about the current winners and losers inside of the lockdown and which industries we thought were moving forward. So with every set of headwinds we also get a set of tailwinds. I think the fight for talent will continue on as we're moving forward. I originally started my business, I was still on the trading floor, trading financial derivatives, don't hate me, for oil. I worked in the oil industry. But we would always look at what's the next move. It's easy to take the first play, right? Where you're looking at all the headwinds, but what are the tailwinds that you should be looking at that are 18 months to 3 years down the line? Which is kind of where my business came into play. I remember watching a talk, and it talked about the fight for people. And they predicted it was going to start in 2020 and it would go to 2030. And this is just really about birth rates. If you look at how many people were born, we just don't have enough people. And so the fight for the war for talent will continue on. First estimates were like 20 to 30, but it's really probably going to go into probably like 2033. 10,000 baby boomers became eligible for retirement starting in the mid-2010s. They continue to be eligible, they move themselves from the workplace. You're looking at global rates of not having enough people. So the fight for talent continues on. I don't think it goes away anytime soon. Some countries, if you look at like ones that are in the news right now, like Russia, their birth rate declined by 50% from 1986 to 1996. The people they have on the front line now were the repopulation group. And they're not doing well in this skirmish. China has the fastest death rate in Asia, aging population of Asian countries. So we just look at what's happening in the United States. We have 1 to 9/11s every month because of the opioid epidemic. We had 260,000 people that are workforce age that are no longer available because they passed away during the COVID pandemic, and there's probably more people. So when you begin to think about these things as we go through multiple syndemics, the headwinds are there. It's not just this year, but what tailwinds can you use to help you retain and attract your own talent?
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I'm sorry I'm keeping it moving because I know we have a little bit less time.
Yeah.
But taking that from the macro level to a more micro level, I know a number of employers, they have these non-compete agreements with their employees, and they're thinking like, oh, okay, I got this person locked in. And so you told me that might change.
On January 5th, the FTC came out with an announcement to get rid of non-competes. We're in the 60-day non-comment period. As non-competes go away, how does that change your own retention strategy to hold on to your employees? Daniel and I both come from garden leave cultures for working in investment banking, has his background in me in oil and gas, and so people don't resign, you go on garden leave, right? And that's how they keep the non-competes more enforceable. But it's not universal, so I think this will be a corporate challenge. I think when I was looking at some of the opinions on the right and the left, some people want it because they want talent, right? They want to get rid of the non-compete so that they can, the small pool that's available, they would like access to them. Others want it to hold on to the brains that they have to continue their advantage. So I think we'll see what happens. Part of that also says that two things important. One, you have to tell all of your employees once it goes into effect that their non-competes are no longer in effect. And the second one, If you're going through a buyout, if you don't own more than 25% of the company, there's no non-compete. So think about all the minority owners and companies that have raised capital.
Yeah, that's wild, and something to keep your eye on. If you're a business owner or if you're someone who currently has a non-compete once they consider leaving. So turning from that onto recruiting practices, I'm gonna tee this one up for you, Seth, because as I mentioned, you built your company from the ground up. You have 170 employees. There's obviously, you hired a lot of people. Like, so what do you have to say about what you think is the best way for recruiting, what you experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this actually connects to the initial question of, in a year of headwinds, how important is retaining talent, attracting talent, et cetera, and the work to be done. So as a bootstrapped company founder, it was never about throwing money at people. Let's put it that way. That was never an option for us. We didn't have that kind of availability of capital to do so. And so where we ended up netting out, which I think we're only doubling down on now this year, given what's going on in the market, is using transparency and trying to give an honest lens into a day in the life in the company, into what we give, what is that social contract you're signing up for with your employer, and give people a sense of a peace of mind that the trust that they're willing to give up, that the time they're willing to invest in their job is worth it, that it will be a fulfilling experience, which we find is inevitably about more than money. It always is on some level. And so in the early days, this was a very kind of personal thing. We were a small company, just adding one person at a time. And so myself, my partner, could be that. We could embody that on behalf of the company. And it was as simple as whatever we say, whatever that commitment is, just delivering on it, right? Which again, is easier said than done maybe, but I think it is the case. And then as we grew, it became about formalizing this, creating processes and frameworks in the company to institutionalize transparency and to institutionalize a kind of employee-first mentality and show that we ask a lot of our people. We do, we drive them very hard, but it's worth it. And it's going to come back around in the community that we offer and the support that we offer. It manifests itself in things like when real life happens, a medical situation, a personal situation, we completely do away with anything other than that for the moment. That is the concern, because real life does happen and what we do, there's no one open, on the operating table. So you have to have that sense of perspective. And then even what Mayor Lamine was talking about, which she kind of half jokingly talked about, that moral companies maybe aren't so common. That becomes a competitive advantage. If you can really double down on that and then live it, it becomes part of the brand. Part of that experience, part of the employee experience. And so in light of the fact that particularly in the tech market, there's been this unbelievable about face, right? In a matter of months, the market went from growth at all costs, capital's cheap, go for it, pay whatever it takes to get whoever it takes, to build whatever it takes, to sell whatever it takes, right? All of a sudden you have to run a disciplined, profitable, sustainably growing company. Imagine that, right? And that completely for us, well, for the industry, it flipped on its head the notion of attracting and retaining talent. I think for us, it only reinforced the approach that I'm describing. Because as you've probably seen, there's many big tech companies have just laid off a lot of people. And so those kind of companies, let's say they can get away with that because no one is worried. They get, their share price is rewarded for doing that. I can only imagine what the sentiment inside the building is like when they do things like that. But at no point is anyone worried that Amazon is going away. The minute you step out of that tier of technology company, the signal it sends, not just externally, but to the market, is what is the health of this company, right? This isn't just like a share price, valuation tactic, letting go of people. And so, once again, if you can demonstrate that level of commitment, that willingness to have honest, transparent conversations about what you're trying to achieve in business and with the business, I think that becomes a powerful tool to attract and retain. And you can play around on our website. You can see we've tried to really push the envelope on that as far as transparency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Daniel, I know that you have some things to tag on to that. We were just talking about, how headwinds produce tailwinds. Apparently, you all are doing well with the layoffs that these referencing. And I think also, I'll just tee it up because I know that you have some thoughts about smaller businesses and recruiting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? Because when we first spoke for this event a few months ago, and then it was rescheduled, we had a very different conversation around talent and tech, right? Mastercard is a tech company in the payment space, and unlike some of the other tech companies that have been in the news lately, we're not laying anybody off, right? I think part of it is that the management really was conscious of how we grew. Like, just to give you an example, in 2019, our former CEO, Ajay Banga, came out and he spoke about something called the decency quotient. And he basically told people, decency quotient is your disposition to make decisions on an ethical basis. Or if you take it to the business level, it's treating your coworkers, your customers, your business environment how you would want to be treated, right? It's kind of a golden rule kind of thing. And we've seen that came in 19, we had the pandemic, and now it was time to test it. How are you going to treat your employees? How are you going to recruit? How are you going to hire? And I am the beneficiary of that, right? I am based in Miami, but my position is a New York role. At that time, they decided, well, we can't find people in New York, so for some reason people didn't want to work in New York or something, and they expanded the search nationwide, and that's how I come into Mastercard. It's very interesting because I agree, right? You see an Amazon and Twitter, Coinbase, right? We do a lot of work in the crypto space now, and they just laid off a bunch of people. For us, that represents an opportunity because now I have a pool of people that are super talented, have a lot of experience. They can work remote because I don't need them all to be in New York or in our office in Berkeley. They can be in Missouri, they can be in Kansas, they can be on the other side of the world. We have a team in Singapore, we have a team in London, and I think it creates a lot of opportunity. It's a matter of perspective, but you have to seize the opportunity, taking into account that the headwinds bring tailwinds. So you can't go crazy and kind of try to build these things that are not sustainable. You have to do it in a way that's even paced and definitely taking into account the realities of the market and people. Right? It's really all about people, like how well you treat your people, how you retain your people. I guess we'll get there at some point.
Actually, you're making me think about another question. I'll move it up a little bit because the next topic is, what can employers offer to employees beyond just giving them more money? Because giving them, everybody loves more money, but as an employer, you may not be able to afford it or may not get you exactly what you want. So like these sort of non-monetary sorts of compensation. And I know that you recently had an experience with Mastercard, like with respect to paternity leave.
Yeah.
First off, congratulations.
Thank you. I am the direct beneficiary of that, right? We have a 16-week paid family leave policy that applies to dads, moms. It can be used for adoptions, and it's very variable in how we apply it. And you can break it up, which is what I did. I took a few days, a few weeks off when we had our baby, and then now I'm going to do the second leg now because my wife is an accountant and tax season is starting, so we need to help each other there. But it's stuff like that, and people really value it, right? I mean, yeah, you can throw a ton of cash at folks, but not everybody is in a position to throw a ton of cash at folks, and the money gets to a point where it's not enough. Like it's not. You get to a certain pay grade, I guess, that it's got to be more than just money. It's time off, remote working. We instituted Flex Fridays, right? If you want to block off the rest of your afternoon and go work at the beach or not even take calls, or you can on Friday afternoon, and pay paternity leave, stuff like that, that resonates a lot with our staff members.
Yeah, and so turning to you, Seth, I know that your company, you have been in a unique and special situation. A lot of your employees have been immigrants. And so I know because of that, like you told me that your company needs to be a support system. Like, what does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah, so early on, my business, I'm born and raised here, but my business partner is born in Russia, raised in Cuba, and has a story, worthy of Hollywood, honestly. And early on, we did hire immigrants simply because we were not in a position to afford talent that came with a quintessential resume that would then be highly sought after in the market. But of course, the notion of talent, right? Talent, you're born with talent, right? And you cultivate that talent, and it's not a function of necessarily the brand on the resume per se. And so we, like our third and fourth hires were software engineers who were months from coming from the day they arrived in Miami, Cubans, and we tapped into different networks that way. So we have a majority of our engineers are Cuban. A disproportionate number of our customer success team happened to be Mexican because we just plugged into a grad school in Mexico, and it just led to a lot of referrals. Again, because we're hiring one person at a time at our size, right? And so there was a lot of that going on. Now, as a result of that, we learned some things, which is that, yes, of course, everyone wants to get paid a fair amount. People want to make more, but when you start to unpack why people want money other than, for discretionary spending and leisure and things like that, it's for security, right? And it's for peace of mind. It helps take care of some of those things. But we realized there were other ways to do that. And then in doing so with an immigrant population, now worldwide we're about 75% immigrant. That includes even like our Singapore office is led by an Australian of Sri Lankan heritage, right? Like things like that, covering all of healthcare, right? Number one, because there's lack of understanding of this insane healthcare system of ours by someone who just arrived in this country, right? It is not like what it was like where they came from. So simply by just paying for it and providing the support network to help them manage it, hugely valuable to them. Far more valuable than giving them the money to pay for it. Understanding that we just very, very proactively say we have an open door policy for anything such as we've done everything from helping people figure out where to move because they need to consider school districts for their child of a certain age, understanding the realities of the expenses associated with commuting and things like that and helping them make decisions that way. Then we also have essentially a visa blind hiring policy because we found that it's a great way to get a lot of talent is to spend the money required to secure visas for international talent that want to be here. And think about that, right? They want to be here actively to that point. And then it also becomes a hugely stressful element in their life, right? Their work authorization status, their ability to be here, the ambivalence of should I make a life here, right? Should I really plant roots here, not knowing what will be? And so by participating in that with them, it's an amazing retention strategy, right? And so I think it surpasses any non-compete, any golden handcuff or anything like that, is the fact that we're a participant in their peace of mind, in their life, even beyond their pure professional life. And so we're always looking for ways to do that. Again, it feels like the right thing to do. It's great for branding, and it's selfish. It's great for retention.
And so now, Ebony, I know you work with your clients are in the gamut. You work with a bunch. Like, what do you say about this sort of non-monetary compensation that can be offered?
I've seen everything. People just get creative from engagement surveys. So in one particular company, they had a factory in a rural area of America. They realized that there was not great financial literacy. So they began to offer, how do you create a budget? That town had a lot of payday loan stores, but no actual banks. And so what did that, exactly, right? No actual banks. And so they had so many people that weren't on direct deposit because of it. And they're looking at lower payroll costs, let's be honest, right? But also not have so many checks getting processed, knowing that the money was there. Because people would actually come in on their days off or send a spouse, which they didn't want to do that with if they were fighting. So they started financial literacy and then convinced a credit union to come to their town 2 days a week so they could service the employees' needs, right? And so those kind of things help with creating a culture that says, we are here in it for us and we want to bring you with us. And so it's just in those kind of little things that people do along the way that help people out. Large tech companies carry leave, like Daniel's on, some of my clients, you don't have to have a life event. And so a trend that I saw during COVID was that people took 12 weeks full paid leave. They were in their early 20s, Generation Z, because they were stressed out and didn't have resiliency. And so what does that look like, right? And so what does it look like when you care a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper? The one thing that stops employee engagement is you don't ask the question to your employee, what do you need to actually live? Most people can't give you that answer in 5 minutes. How much money do you need to bring in the door in order for you and your family to live comfortably. Start asking that question and bring in literacy, it begins to shift the culture.
And they only know the answer when they're not living comfortably.
Correct.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's like fascinating. And turning back to you, changing the subject a little bit, but like how about, developing a good culture for employees? Like it's about managers. I know that you've actually written about there's 4 kinds of needs. I think that people would find that interesting.
Sure, yeah. So I talk about how do you create psychologically safe teams that foster innovation. And so the first level is people need to feel valued for who they are. The humanity, not the fact that they went to Harvard. Thank you, Seth, but not because of that. But
Athletics.
No reinventing. I worked on a trading floor, don't come for me. And they're valued for their humanity, not for the worthiness they bring to the job. The second one is that they have the right to engage and learn, that they can be the person who's not the subject matter expert. And then the third one is contributor safety. Do you give them the autonomy with an exchange of giving them the right pathway? Do you paint up for them? And then the last one is challenger safety. Do they get air cover for candor? Can they ask you the hard questions and still keep their job? Whenever I go into a company, I'm like, oh, have you told them this? And they say, oh no, you get fired for that. I might lose, and people will say in open meetings, I might lose my job. That's a company that doesn't have psychological safety. You can't innovate and incubate innovation if your people don't have the ability to go into discourse and expect polarization in your innovation session. You're not going to thrive.
Yeah, you said this, again, this is really super interesting. Your company created something called Ops in a Box, like
Yes.
operations in a box. So could you explain that? I know that ties directly into culture.
That's right. So for us, I guess one good advice we got at one point was that culture is not aspirational for a company. You don't say, this is the culture I think I have or I want to have. You have to have a very honest, dispassionate, self-reflective moment as a company to say, what is my culture? You might not like what you see, and then you have the ability to change it. But we had this happening very organically, our culture, and it would shift. It's like there was kind of seasons to it. And along the way, as we're building the business, we're putting a lot of rigor and attention and resources, certainly behind product and technology. And we're doing the same behind go-to-market and sales and customers and all that. But then we're not necessarily, we find ourselves constantly retrofitting to catch up with the company, right? So you have like the business, like the product and the customer and the sales. But in the company itself, we're just always like a step behind. And so we learned the hard way that we needed to be rigorous equally about the company. And so we started to develop frameworks and again, get a lot of good advice around what it means to set goals for the company. And when I say this is not goals for the purpose of measuring performance. This is alignment, right? This is ensuring that everybody knows what the company's trying to do and on what timeline. And then that way the departments can know what they're trying to do on what timeline and the individuals. And it's just like this nested thing. And then we said, well, how are you expected to behave? Right? Well, that's the values, right? You need prescribed values. And it started off as values, which was just a series of abstract nouns. And then, of course, with majority immigrant culture, non-native speakers, they all did not understand the same way what those words meant. And so it became values and actions, right? We've done iterations on this. And then how we define hierarchy, how we define management, which was this concept of the Bill of Rights, the Employee Bill of Rights. We couldn't define what it meant to manage someone because it was inconsistent between a sales manager, an engineering manager, a finance manager. But to be managed was consistent, right? If you're in the company will look after your well-being, will ensure you're following processes, will make sure you have the subject matter expertise you need to do your job, will make sure you're clear on the outcomes that are expected of you. That was consistent, and then it's just kind of weighted differently. So long story short is these frameworks became our operational manual. And they happened organically, and every, year or two, et cetera, each one of them started to collect dust, started to feel a little aged, but we were iterating on it, as opposed to having to build it from the ground up every time. And finally, we reached a point where we said, wow, this is getting consistent. This is the glue that enables us to maintain and adjust and manage our culture, which is so critical to the success of the business. And so we took it one step further to open source these things, because we said if we prepare these frameworks for the public to digest, then they're really tight, right? It really is the best way to ensure that any part of the business is operating at truly a top level. And so you can see these things. I mean, the easiest way, go Google EveryMundo Ops in a Box. It's a page on our website, and there's a whole world where we unpack these things. And the notion, and we released this when we were around the time we were acquired last year, it was a year and a half ago, as a way to demonstrate, number one, is a give back to the local community, because we got so much from it. And we felt like other up-and-coming companies like ours didn't have to learn the hard way, did not have to repeat the mistakes we made. We could help them fast-track that. But it's also, again, selfish in the sense that with the open sourcing of this, it's that same open source principle that you apply to software. We've solicited feedback. We've worked with some other businesses that have taken a piece of these to help their internal challenges. They tell us how it's working for them. And then that allows us to make ours better, not only by what we learn internally, right? Because up until then, we were only applying this to our own company, which means improvement was only motivated by a flaw or a mistake, where we saw, a gap, or we had outgrown something. And so this rigor, right? The same level of rigor in process and framework, in also ensuring adherence and accountability for these things, by putting the same amount of that we do into our software development, into our sales efforts, into our customer management, we started to see similar outcomes to those areas. We weren't constantly playing catch up. It became part and parcel. And in many ways, I'd say it's become the tip of the spear, especially now as a subsidiary of a bigger company with its own culture, with its own processes. This just continues to get, these things are just tested, and we come back to them all the time.
Yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, I'll second that. Just Google it. EveryMundo Ops in the Box. They're all on there. You can use them for yourself in your own businesses.
And I'm happy to talk to them again, because it's for us.
Yeah. And so Daniel, you've been listening very attentively. Do you have something you want to add to that?
No, I'm fascinated because it's absolutely right. We talk about it at Mastercard, the Mastercard way, right? And it's doing well by doing good, and it's a lot of really pretty words on walls and stuff, but people actually buy into it, right? And it starts, and I know we hear it a lot at seminars and conferences and articles that talk from the top. Right? There's a lot of business leaders in the room, but it's fascinating to have you here because you actually did it, right? And so we talk about it. Our former, like I said, our former CEO, he's Indian, and our current CEO is German. And then the shift was very interesting, but they both bowed. It's a value that they live out, right? It's that decency that needs to permeate through the entire organization. And when you actually see someone who's done it from the ground up, it's really fascinating because we live it and we think that it just happened organically. Like, oh yeah, it just happened. But it takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of intent to create a culture that is welcoming, that is innovating, and that everybody thinks and feels that they belong, right? My team is dispersed all over the world, London, Missouri, New York, Miami, wherever. And we all feel part of this team that is doing really cool stuff. We're working on really complex and really interesting matters, but more importantly, we actually get along. Like, we actually enjoy working together because we've been very intentional about creating a culture where if somebody needs to go on paternity leave, I can trust my team to do what they're doing, and I can disconnect for 16 weeks and come back and be like, all right, what happened? And nothing broke. That's the kind of culture that you want. I'm like, you guys didn't eat me? No. But that's the kind of culture that you want to implement. That's the kind of culture that you want to create. And it has to be real. It can't just be words on the wall. You have to live it out every single day.
And you said intentional.
That's it.
That's it. I think if not, and again, before we really got serious about it, you get tribalism, right? Like, certain people just spend more time with each other working in a given day or week or month, and they form their own culture, and that might not work across lines. That there can be oil and water there, certainly. And I mean, here's like a little example of when we had a negative shift. We got to a point, I don't know, around like 20, 25 employees, where we could start to afford the cute things that tech companies have, like ping pong tables and things like that, right? And so we started doing a little more of that, snacks and those kinds of things. And for those who had been there, they saw it for what it was. Like, we earned this, right? But with the next like 10 hires, they were coming to work for the company because of those things. That was what was alluring to them. They thought it signaled something about the company. They didn't realize the opposite, which is, we always saw ourselves as you're happy because you're productive. You're not productive because you're happy, right? And we started finding that those new employees, by the way, most of which are still here, so we course corrected. It wasn't them. They thought that we were expected to be productive because we were making them happy through snacks and ping pong and things like that. And so, like, again, I'm sure there's billion-dollar versions of that could happen at Microsoft. I'm sorry, at Mastercard if not managed, right? If not intentional. It's yeah, that's right.
I, however, will vote for foosball. So
you write the song, you can choose. Right?
Yeah. So changing gears a little bit, we have to get onto diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is such an important topic nowadays, especially with recruitment, maintaining good culture and whatnot. And it's a big topic. And so I want to toss it over to you, Ebony, like how do you effectively create diverse and inclusive work environments? Why is that important?
Well, one, it's a fight for talent. If you leave out a significant portion of the population, it's going to make it harder for you, just plain and simple. But two, when you're looking at, there's about $25 trillion in wealth in the United States, and 20% of it is inside minority-owned businesses. So when we talk diversity, it's not just employees, but it's also what does your supply chain look like? So it's important, one, for psychological safety, but two, some of the mishaps we saw, especially most recently with Balenciaga and a few others, and Gucci with their sweaters, happened because you're in an echo chamber. So managing and polarization is one of the headwinds that you can overcome really easily and make it a tailwind, because if you have diversity of thought at the table, people who don't all agree, who all didn't grow up the same, you're going to get a more innovative product that's going to tap into a customer base that you haven't thought about, right? So if you think about things like, Google with their new Pixel phone, they went True Tone, right? And then they open sourced it so that other people can identify other skin tones besides the majority Western European skin tone. In that, they tapped into a new marketplace. They realized that a lot of the things that they're developing needs to have product inclusion, right? And so that diversity and inclusion doesn't just come in saying, hey, we have this many minority employees, we live in a majority minority city. But it also is the things that you see below the waterline. Do we have veterans? Do we have single moms? Do we have a stay-at-home mom who now has returned to the workforce, who has a completely different view of what Miami looks like for certain people? Tapping into that diversity of thought and experience and lived experience changes how you show up to your clients, one, but then also to your employees. So I think diversity is important. I would like for us to move beyond the stuff that's above the iceberg, but America has a 400-year history of it. And we haven't spent 400 years working on it. So those things will come up. But when you're talking innovation and retaining talent, highlight those things. One of my very first clients was a product manager in Silicon Valley. She's MIT educated, double degree. She was coming back from maternity leave. And I said, what do you want in your next company? A friend's sister. And I said, and she goes, culture is the most important thing. She goes, I'm gonna get lots of job offers. I've seen a lot of companies I work for go public. I have resources. My husband is at a very well-known tech company and writes a lot of patents for them. He's a product manager as well. And she goes, can we just when I talk to you, can we just create a matrix of what's most important to me? And so we did this culture matrix. After every interview, she scored them because she's a product manager. She went to MIT. She built a little program for it. We plugged it all in. And only the top 3 companies, culture-wise, got a second round interview with her. And then we came up with what was that test going to be for her to want to join. It was 2 days at that company. And so the culture test that Seth talked about was her deciding factor. 9 job offers in 7 days, right? 9, and she hadn't worked in 9 months because we only had 3 months. She goes, I want to be with my baby longer. I'm just going to resign. I can get a job pretty easily. This was 7 years ago. And it was in those culture tests, she saw that people went home. She goes, yeah, everybody started leaving around 5:30, which makes sense to me. My last job had to stay till 8:30. I need to see my baby. Other things that were important. Her boss was like, you should know what I do before. And she was like, really? She's like, but I go online after my kids doing bad. So if you send me emails after 4, I'll kind of catch up on them after my kids go to bed and respond to you, but I'll time it for 7 a.m. the next day so that you don't have to respond to me. And those were the cultural things that kept her at that place, because product management is really important in a tech company. They actually know where the company is going in 18 months to 2 years. The CEO and COO are very operationally focused in 6 months, but that product manager has the vision for where their next customer set comes from, and also then where their org chart is going to go. So understanding what that matrix and the culture looks like was super important to her, and has become more and more important to people as we go through the syndemics and the endemic we're going to continue to live through for the next 10 years.
How about you, Daniel? What do you have to say?
I think it's super interesting. I'll give you a few examples. My manager went to a very prestigious law school. She is Greek American, and at some point in her career, she had 3 young boys at home, and she decided to just stay home. She stayed home for 8 years and came back. And so Mastercard hired her because, again, your skills are your skills. Like, your life events are your life events. And it was not a consideration, right? It was one of those things where she's great, she's talented, she knows what she's doing. Yeah, she's been home for a while, but I mean, look at that talent, right? And you bring that in, and you foster that cultural inclusion. Like, I'm a product of that, right? I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico. I went to law school in Puerto Rico, and I've been given opportunities throughout my career, a lot of them that I was allowed to walk into rooms that I probably shouldn't have been invited to, right? But that culture, that inclusion, that diversity that you create in your environment and in your company starts to reflect in the products and the things that you start creating, right? For example, I'm going to say maybe a year ago or a little less, Mastercard came out with what we call the Mastercard Touch. So it's a credit card that, credit cards now, if you open it, you pull out your Bank of America card. It used to be that you could touch the numbers and know what it was. Now they're all flat. So for someone who's blind, that creates a challenge, right? So somebody internally who was very receptive and had a personal experience with a blind family member said, why don't we create something for this segment of the community, which, when you think about it, is not a major part of the community, a major part of your customer base, but we still did it, right? And now your debit card feels different than your credit card, different from your prepaid card. Stuff like, again, we're very receptive to every community. So there is a program for certain banks that have wanted to partner to create credit cards that you can use your true name, right? It's called Mastercard True Name, because it reflects your identity, not necessarily what your legal name is. And so these are things that start trickling into your product development phase. So now we have our product developers and our really smart tech teams using their personal life situations, whether it's parenting, their choices, lifestyle, whatever they want, is also reflecting your work, and you have to be receptive to that, because then that's going to create opportunities for your business and create a culture within your workspace that is really fostering to everyone. Everybody feels included, everybody feels heard, and it's really, I know it sounds like a lot of Kool-Aid, kumbaya, but it's real, right? And again, I've been around, I've worked at investment banks and stuff like that, and this is a very different kind of animal because everybody from the top has been intentional about creating this culture.
Yeah. How about you, Seth? I know that you have a very intercultural, cross-cultural workforce. How do you try to make sure that everyone feels included or deal with any miscommunications or whatnot?
Yeah, so in listening to the others, I don't want to repeat what they said, because that's very much the benefit that we've seen around diversity of experience, diversity of thought. What I think is interesting as I think about diversity and the diversity of our team, and what that means. Diversity comes at first glance with certain challenges around things like communication and potentially not a substantial prior knowledge and understanding simply on the back of shared culture or shared experience. However, because of that, by addressing those challenges, by fostering communication, by enabling people of diverse experiences and backgrounds and cultures and genders and races and ethnicities to work well together, your company becomes phenomenal, right? It builds an incredibly strong business where you're not cutting corners on alignment and on communication, which then the output of that, this is what I'm thinking of, like trying to like kind of put it together as we're talking, is for us, I think it's been empathy, right? Because it's very easy and natural to be empathetic to someone who has a very, very similar experience to you. But the work that goes into having empathy for someone who doesn't then fosters institutional empathy and a norm of empathy. And those who are not empathetic are pariahs. And that's what you want, right? And then the other side of it for us is in the market. We work with 100 airlines around the world. They're literally all over the world, right? That's how airlines are. There's not too many in any one country, right? Let alone in a city. And so the diversity, and I should write a book on this, it's insane. Like the experiences we have with our customers run the gamut. You can imagine working with a Chinese airline, a Thai airline, an Indian airline, an airline in Rwanda, an airline in Germany, an airline in Canada, an airline in Brazil. You're dealing with people, and those people are usually from those places. And by developing the understanding of the work needed to communicate well and the benefits and the empathy that comes with that, it informs the way we engage our customers. And it leads to business success, it leads to customer retention, it leads to customer growth, it leads to a warmth of trust in the relationship with the customer. So it becomes something, frankly, if you can get it right, you can weaponize it in the market. And that's very powerful.
That's a good point. We have a few minutes left. So there's something that I wanted to ask about, which is quiet quitting. It's coming up in the press of people who are basically, pejoratively, it means doing the bare minimum. Perhaps people are burnt out from COVID and whatnot. But there may be other perspectives on it. What about you? What do you think, Daniel?
I mean, to be honest, I think it's always been there. We might have not always. We just call it something really pretty now. We used to call it someone who was slacking, or someone who was just checked out, or we had all these terms for it, right? I think it's always existed. We just are now paying attention to it, and we want to do something about it, right? And I saw it when I first came out of law school and worked at a law firm, and you could tell who was wanting to ride that partnership track and who was just there to get their paycheck and go home. And everybody thought, hey, just does what he does. And it's fine, right? I think you have to be open to everybody's personal situation. Like some people, I had a conversation this morning from someone on my team. He's in the middle of they just moved, his wife just had a baby, and he says, I don't want a promotion right now. Like I am good where I am. I'm going to do my job and I'm gonna kick butt, but I'm good where I am, right? And so I'm like, right, it's not quite quitting, but it's similar, like you have to be open and receptive to people's personal situation. Now, if you see someone who is clearly disengaged, then that's a different story. I mean, you as a manager, as a business owner, as a business leader, you have to find out what's happening and do your best to manage for that. But as far as quiet quitting itself, I think it's always been there. I think we're now paying attention.
Ebony?
I just think it's be putting boundaries in place. The pandemic taught us a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You may need to value your grandmother a little bit more, your cousin, your children a little bit more. And if you're on your email until 10 o'clock every night, it doesn't show them that they feel valued. There's a lot of anxiety in the world right now, and people have put more personal boundaries and expressed them in the workplace than they did. I mean, look, I was trading derivatives. The market closed at 2:30. I stopped answering my phone at 5:30 because we're not saving lives. The market doesn't open again until 8 o'clock. Don't call me, right? I was known for it on my team. Right? So, was I quiet quitting? No, I was committed to you, but not for all of 24 hours in my day. And so I personally think that my job enables my life, and that's the way I always approached it in my 30-year career. It is not my main dish, it is a side dish, it is wonderful, it is flavorful, I give it all I can, but I was never one who lived for work. I was always a high performer, but I don't want to shoot the shit with you about the market at 6 o'clock at night. Dude, I'd be sleeping. I was at high yoga. And so I think this is more Generation Z deciding that they're going to put more boundaries in place because they've gone through, this is the generation that lived through the 2008 recession. They saw the replaceability, so you have to build a life that has a more full spectrum approach. And so we gave it a cute name, but I think it's just boundaries.
And as a last question, I know you said may have a different perspective because of their businesses.
We've caught an employee having another job because they are not in the office and we don't see them. We found it. I don't know how well this scales, but it's accountability, right? So to manage, what we found is again, we're not like dealing with many instances of quiet quitting or whatever you want to call it, but to your point, even like slacking, just low performance, right? That's what it is. It's another version of that. It puts the right pressure on the business to create individual accountability for outcomes. It forces you to come up with ways to measure and monitor and engage your employees, but then you have to make sure that the way in which you choose to do that adheres to your cultural norms and to the culture you want your company to have. Right, so we a big thing for us is whenever we've started to explore the possibility of time tracking, it just never works out with our engineers because the signal it will send to them will be antithetical to everything else we're telling them about how we trust them. So we've had to come up with other mechanisms in order to create visibility of the work being done and to ensure that if there is, a bad apple somewhere, we catch it. And then it's also just because of the intensity of the work at the company, you can't hide for very long. We're very lean. There's work to do. And so again, I think being bootstrapped has helped that too, right? I can absolutely see how in a world where a company gets overfunded with equity capital or whatever, you can get fat. And then that's when people can hide because you have people who don't need to give it their all necessarily to accomplish whatever outcome you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, that's been our experience with that.
And so I think we're out of time. This has been a great panel. Thank you all for making it.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit bastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @BastAmron.